everybody. We won't give up. We are back with Charles Kaprowicz and Citizens Initiative, and I'm so glad to have you guys back with us. And we are just so proud that you guys are doing so good. I know that Charles has a book out now, and he's going to explain a lot of things to you. And without further ado, here's Charles Kaprowicz, and welcome.
Thank you, Zita. Thank you, my dear, wonderful friend. Folks, I'm glad you tuned in to PNNTalkRadio.com, and I welcome you. The Countermand Amendment Report promises to be the most important radio show on the Internet, that is, in America. We are broadcasting on our flagship station, PNN Talk Radio, at PNNTalkRadio.com. I'd like you to call, email, or text your friends and associates right now. Ask them to tune in at PNNTalkRadio.com. We are going to discuss on the Countermand Amendment Report issues that will give you hope for our constitutional republic. We're not going to rant. We're not going to be a major complainer of problems that we have. We're going to show you how we can solve them. We will be providing solutions to our national crises on issues relating to federal encroachment on states' rights and your personal liberties. I am Charles Kaprowicz, Executive Director for Citizen Initiatives and the Countermand Amendment. I will be your host for the Countermand Amendment Report. There will be two segments to this show. The first segment, which starts at about 8 o'clock Eastern Time, will be detailed discussions on urgent issues of our day. National and state leaders will often be our special guests to add their perspective. In the second hour, at 9 o'clock until 10, there will be a more formal classroom approach where our course material will come from my textbook, The Countermand Amendment, the missing piece in the Article 5 puzzle. You are going to learn a great deal about our Constitution, and especially why the founders inserted Article 5. We will be covering 33 chapters carefully over a period of 8 weeks. As a course participant, you will be able to talk with us through live online chats. This will be an opportunity for you, your children, family members, and friends to learn why we can and will restore our constitutional republic and reclaim our heritage. Don't forget to order your copy of the Countermand Amendment book. We will make sure that you will receive it in a few days. You can go to countermands.us, click the donate button next to the book cover, and we will ship one book to you for each donation of $19.95, which includes shipping and handling. The book will also prove to be a classic addition to your personal library. If you prefer, the book can be ordered through local bookstores and at Amazon.com. We will be talking about real solutions to real problems that the states and nations are facing relating to taxation, violations of rights in the Constitution. Now, folks, you know what the enumerated rights are. They're those rights that are stated in the Constitution that we are guaranteed and are being denied because of federal encroachment on our civil liberties. We'll be talking a lot about them. We're also going to be talking about unenumerated rights in the 9th and 10th Amendments. We're going to show you how to identify those unenumerated rights, how to make them enumerated rights, and how to protect the states with these new enumerated rights and your personal liberties. We're going to be talking about energy issues, healthcare issues, social issues, environmental protection agency issues, Bureau of Land Management issues. You know, Senator Mikulski from Alaska this week put out an incredible video that impressed me greatly. It was on YouTube. I sent it out to my friends on Facebook and email. I wanted people to see just the terrible place we're at in this country from the standpoint of land grabs by the federal government. She showed in a pictorial form with the state of Alaska that less than 2% of all the land in Alaska is owned by private individuals. I want you to hear what I just said. Less than 2% of the land in Alaska is privately owned. 60-some% is owned by the federal government. There are some other issues that take it into forestry and other places, including land protected by the state. And the balance is what the people own. And that happens to be 1.8%, if I remember correctly. That's a crime against Americans, unexplainable. It's unconscionable to think that that has happened to us. To think that we have allowed it to happen is insane. And our Constitution was supposed to protect us from that kind of encroachment by the federal government. We'll be talking about internal revenue rulings. Have you ever been upset with the Internal Revenue Service? Have you ever wondered if there's a way you can stop them and reverse some of their rulings that in fact have caused multitudes, maybe millions of Americans misery, including myself? We're going to show you how to stop it with the Countermand Amendment. How about court decisions that really are burdensome to the states? Do you know that the Supreme Court makes decisions based on cases that they agree to review, and that once those decisions are made, such as Roe versus Wade, giving the woman the right to decide that she can have an elected abortion even though there's no reason for it, the fact is that that one decision amended the Constitution without the ratification by the states and cost us 50 million babies. 7 men out of 9 made that foolish decision. I wouldn't want to be in their shoes for all the tea in China. They're in trouble when they stand before the Lord. How about congressional budgets? Or even debt that is added to the congressional budget. Let's say that Congress, with the signature of the president, they send back to the states. Hold on, please. They send back to the states a budget that requires a new $1 trillion debt imposed on the American people. Did you know that our Countermand Amendment can countermand and rescind that budget, forcing Congress to rewrite it? And then when they rewrite that budget, they will have to do so with the understanding that their new budget that they're going to propose now to the people of this country, remember the people are the sovereign agencies. Under Article 5, they elect legislators who represent them under Article 5 for the purpose of protecting our Constitution. So now the federal government has to say, hey, wait a minute, the citizens have a say in this. They've countermanded it. They've rescinded it. We better rewrite it. And since the objection was, we will not accept $1 trillion of new debt, all of a sudden you're going to find some changes in the way our finances and government are handled, better than the Balanced Budget Amendment, and we have one. How about congressional statutes themselves that are very burdensome and onerous to the states? How about executive orders? You know, the president just recently made an executive order, although it is being challenged in the courts, but it won't be a permanent ruling, just as long as the Supreme Court can always adjust it. But he made a ruling that allowed over 5 million illegal immigrants to become legal residents in the United States with an executive order. Well, guess what? With the Countermand Amendment in a few weeks, that executive order could have been rescinded, and the president will have to just pound salt. You can address issues of the Department of Education. How about unfunded liabilities? What an incredible problem for the states. The federal government adds debt to the states by forcing them to agree on taking on responsibilities for different projects that they don't want, only so that they will get some money. It's a foolish circular argument that is deceiving the states. The states foolishly fall into the trap, and the federal government gets stronger and stronger in controlling the state legislatures, because now they have enough Democrats and liberals and progressives and socialists in the state legislatures to force them to move in the direction of the national government. We can stop that, and we can stop it through state legislatures and the Countermand Amendment. Now, there's one other category we're going to talk about, non-government mandates. Did you know that you are under the influence and control of agencies that are not actually government agencies, like the Federal Reserve? We're going to be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about how the Countermand Amendment can address the encroachments on your rights because of that. You will receive also weekly reports on the countermand amendment's progress in the state legislatures and updates on other single-issue amendment initiatives that Citizen Initiatives is sponsoring. The countermand amendment is the most important constitutional initiative in America since the 1787 Constitutional Convention. Now, folks, I want you to hear what I just said, because I believe this. I believe it with great conviction. The countermand amendment is the most important constitutional initiative in America since the 1787 Constitutional Convention. You can have part in making history to restore our heritage and constitutional republic. Sovereign citizens are already, through their elected state legislatures, taking America back for our children and heritage permanently and peacefully, with initiatives being advanced in the legislatures supporting the countermand amendment. Yours truly has been advancing single-issue amendments to our Constitution under Article 5, either through Congress or state legislatures, for over 4 decades, folks. I am an old man. I'm still in good shape. I think I have a few more years to go. That's why I keep moving this amendment forward. I want to leave for my kids a way in which to have a republic, a constitutional republic that protects them. I have worked with some of the finest United States senators and representatives in Congress. I have also worked with some of the finest state senators and representatives in the legislatures. I regard these servants to be honorable men performing the unenviable task of preserving our Constitution on some of the most severe problems this nation has had to face. It is not my education alone that qualifies me to talk to you about Article 5 and the Countermand Amendment report. Even though I have a bachelor's degree from Cal State in political science and 4.5 years of postgraduate work at Loyola Law School and Moody Bible Extension Studies. But the fact that there is no one else who has any longer tenure in working to protect our Constitution, Article 5, than myself. That I am not bragging. I am just simply stating a fact. I probably have more longevity in the issue of Article 5 than all of the leaders in all of the Article 5 groups combined. You will learn how Article 5 groups have cost America, that is, how anti-Article 5 groups have cost America over $18 trillion in debt. Also, the loss of $20 trillion in tax revenue, and the loss of 50 million citizens through abortions. They are directly attributed to the fact that anti-Article 5 groups, who have opposed the use of Article 5 on flawed arguments, and I'll be covering them in more depth in the second hour as we go forward with our lessons, but a little bit in a more general way in a moment. But they have, on the pretense of trying to protect our Constitution, have in fact damaged our Constitution. They have in fact cost the American people $18 trillion of debt because we couldn't use Article 5 to force a balanced budget amendment when that would have stopped the problem. We can and will restore our heritage and constitutional republic with the Countermand Amendment. For the first hour tonight, we will talk about the real costs to America, which is part of what we're doing now, that anti-Article 5 groups, such as the John Birch Society, Eagle Forum, sorry folks, I do have a cold and I'm struggling with it. That anti-Article 5 groups, such as the John Birch Society, Eagle Forum, many Democrats, if not most, if not almost all, some Republicans and some Libertarians have caused. To think that the founders gave us the way to remedy future problems safely when the federal government looks the other way, and that these groups oppose the use of Article 5 is unconscionable. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. And they've been doing this for probably 30 plus years. Let's consider the Balanced Budget Amendment. Over 40 years in the making by at least two generations of patriots who have tried to rein in the federal spending with the Balanced Budget Amendment. We happen to be one of those groups, although there's another group that has really been at this longer than we have, and that's the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force. However, over 30 plus years, 32 state legislatures have completed applications on Congress to call for the Balanced Budget Amendment Convention. But these anti-Article 5 groups, with their flawed understanding of state legislature sovereignty, paralyzed legislators in key states, causing them to rescind their applications. My last count was that 18 states have rescinded their applications, leaving only 14 active applications. However, a new generation of patriots stepped up to the plate and showed how legislatures must make a new application for the Balanced Budget Amendment Convention. That group, by the way, is the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force, who I support. At this date, 13 states have renewed their applications on Congress, so the Balanced Budget Amendment Convention is now only 7 states short of forcing Congress to convene the convention. Now, I want you to know that the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force, about 5 years ago, endorsed our single-issue Balanced Budget Amendment. They endorsed the pre-approved text regarding it. You'll learn more about that later. And they also endorsed the delegate resolution that binds delegates. We'll learn more about that in the course. But I also agreed to endorse their No Runaway Convention Act. And the reason that that relationship developed was because we had a common interest in controlling federal spending so that my kids and your kids and our grandchildren will not be strapped with any more debt. They already have between the $18 trillion in debt plus maybe $125 or $150 trillion in unfunded liabilities. They probably have close to $500,000 of debt right now that they're obligated to pay, each one. And so do you have the same amount. Why is this significant? Because if these well-meaning anti-Article 5 groups and individuals had joined in the fight for a BBA, we would not have had an $18 trillion debt today and $125 trillion or more in unfunded liabilities. This is unforgivable, an unforgivable consequence of their poor judgment. Now, folks, we've got to straighten this out. We have to help states like Wyoming and Montana and Idaho and Utah and New Mexico and Arizona, other states that linger with this mentality that somehow you can only have a constitutional convention under Article 5. We have to convince them that they're wrong and that these other groups have been deceiving them, that they in fact are in charge and they need to learn how to use Article 5 safely and quickly. And the process is simple. On what premise have these groups made claim to not using Article 5 conventions? On the premise that an Article 5 convention would turn into an open convention and we would lose our Constitution. That's their argument. Totally unfounded. You're going to find out why in the course that we're going to have over the next 8 weeks. Folks, let your friends know that this program is going to turn out to be the most important radio talk show in America, because we are going to give you solutions and ways to reclaim our nation and to restore our constitutional republic that no one else is doing. And we're going to do it with one amendment and with one declaration that the states are sovereign, not Congress, no one else. And we're going to do it in a way that it will be safe and that the state legislatures will regulate and control the convention, and the outcome will be ultimately in the states for ratification. We're going to do that because we are patriots who love our nation. We believe this is a Christian nation. We believe God has had his unseen hand on this nation for almost, 230 years plus, going back to the Mayflower, 400 and some years ago. And we believe if we lose this Constitution, if we lose the right, enumerated and unenumerated rights, the inalienable rights that we presently have, then not only will we become subjects to tyrants but the nations of the world will look at us in despair because they will fall into the same problems. That's how important our nation is. So here they are. They argue this false claim that you can only have a constitutional convention, which is nuts. The founders, if they thought that, they would have concluded that their constitution wasn't good enough and that it has to be renewed every so many years by the states by calling an Article 5 convention in order to rewrite it. That's what they would have had to say. But they didn't say that. They say right in the amendment, Article 5, it's for proposing amendments. Isn't that wonderful? They had the wisdom to know that they couldn't foresee every circumstance, but they also would not allow themselves be deceived into thinking that everything they did was infallible, that there were circumstances that the future legislatures would have to address, and they needed to give them the sovereign authority to address them safely and quickly. They did so in Article 5. So today we have a constitution that is the supreme law of the land, is into perpetuity, and is restricted for the purpose of protecting itself by proposing amendments. It's a marvelous plan they gave us, that we've allowed these anti-Article 5 groups and these liberals, these socialists and Marxists and all these nuts to decide that this is not what we have is to our shame. Because we have it. They don't have it. We have it. During one of our chapter lessons, we will find out why Article 5 does not allow for open or constitutional conventions, but rather amendment conventions for the purpose of proposing amendments. We will also show that sovereign state legislatures control the process, not Congress, nor the courts, nor the executive, and certainly not the delegates that the legislature send to a convention. You're going to learn why. And you're going to learn why it is a process that will protect states' rights, and it's nonpartisan. If there is a politician in the states that thinks that their state's rights are not so important that they can throw them away in order to listen to their national party, shame on them. And folks, you guys, you get rid of them. Get them out of office. Your state's rights are more important than political ideology or political dogma. Article 5 was given to us for such a time as this. And we must stop these anti-Article 5 groups from hurting our country any further. Citizen Initiatives, under my leadership, is doing just that. It's amazing what truth can do. It's amazing what facts can do. When we make presentations to legislatures all over this country, and I just came back from a 7-week trip to 9 different states, I was received extremely well by the legislators. Even in one state, they brought me before the House, they set me up in the balcony, and they required that I sit in a position so everyone can see me because they were in session. There were 140 some legislators who were looking at me, and then I was introduced to the legislature as Charles Kaprowicz, the director of Countermand Amendment. He's here to help us understand how to retain state rights. And he will be available in the House chambers, in the House lounge afterwards for as long as is needed to answer your questions. That was a moment to be remembered, folks. I was honored to think that anybody would have considered the work that we're doing that important. But that's what they do when they understand the difference between us and the anti-Article 5 groups and even many of the pro-anti-Article 5 amendment groups. Did you know that these anti-Article 5 groups have cost us the loss of tax revenue of $20 trillion? Now, we know we've lost the opportunity of protecting our financial affairs so that now we're in debt $18 trillion. We're a debtor nation. Incredible. Absolutely incredible that we should have become a debtor nation overnight. But we are a debtor nation. But there's even something worse. Please listen to me now. I don't care what your political persuasion, I don't care what your religion is, I don't care how important some of these issues have been ingrained into your mind that have deceived you into believing wrong things. Please listen to what I have to say right now, because these are facts and they are truths. 50 million babies or more have been aborted, and 50 million fathers have lost their God-given right to live children and a live heritage. That's what has happened since 1973 when Roe versus Wade was decided. 50 million. Now, I wouldn't want to be in the hands of those 7 men who made the decision on the Supreme Court that amended our Constitution without ratification by the states and caused the death of all of these babies. The blood of these children are on their hands and on the hands of everyone along the way who has done nothing to stop it. And at the same time, they're going to wish they'd never been alive when they stand before the Lord and give an account of themselves for not using the power that they had in this Constitution to protect all human life. Did you know that 50 million doctors, entrepreneurs, scientists, pastors, missionaries, statesmen, honorable politicians, philanthropists, and many, many more have been lost to America forever because we allowed these deceivers to convince us that it wasn't murder in killing the child in the womb, but it was a choice. Do not fall for this foolishness. And if you're a woman who believes this, or you've had an abortion, the Lord will help you. He'll get you out of this, and He'll forgive you and get you a head start in starting a new way of thinking and a new life. But if you're still thinking that this is something that you have a right to, I am telling you as a man, I have an equal right to a live child from the woman who is bearing my child and a live heritage. And you and no one else is going to deny me that right as long as I have breath. And understand the importance of what I said. And for you men out there who have been gutless for the last 42 years, you better start standing up and digging your heels in. You've been pansying around with all kinds of foolish thinking that has actually contributed to the loss of this 2 generations. Do you know that 200 million grandparents lost their grandchildren and their heritage because of abortion? Now just think about this. If 50 million unborn babies have been murdered, how many grandparents does each child have? He's got 4. So that means that at least 200 million times a grandparent has lost their grandchild. That's unconscionable. We only have 330 million people in America. 200 million? I don't even want to think of the consequences. I am just working my tail off to ask God and to plead with Him for the wisdom and the direction that we need to see His favor and His forgiveness on this land one more time. We don't deserve it, but we must see that favor if we have any chance at seeing our Christian heritage and God-fearing culture restored. Listen to this. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. That's Proverbs 4:12. Now, can you imagine that? We deny the Scripture every day because we are murdering 3,000 babies every day because we think the way of choice is wise, but it leads to death. Think about that. How about this? Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Proverbs 14:34. How about this? Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom He hath chosen for His own inheritance. That's us. You see, we are a nation who God has had His hand on, His unseen hand on, for 230 years plus going back to the Mayflower. And I'm going to talk to you more about that in a moment. And He has clearly identified us as His people over and over again. Now, how is it that we have allowed the Marxists and the liberals and the progressives and the socialists and all the intellectuals that deny the presence of God, who do not fear God, how is it that we've allowed them to come and control our culture, to control our schools, to control our government? How is it that happened? It happened because we have foolishly refused to fight. We have foolishly surrendered our authority in the Constitution to their secular reasoning. And we have been the loser. We now have become, instead of a sanctity of life culture, which before Roe versus Wade, we have always honored the sanctity of life. As a matter of fact, all 50 states, well, actually, all 50 states really, or all the states, I should say, I don't know if there are 1 or 2 that I may be wrong on, but there are at least 48 states that have either statutes or planks or constitutional amendments that protected the child from conception. Roe versus Wade did away with all of that. Now, that's the day. There are many other things we did as a nation that really pushed God into a corner. realizing that his favor could not be shown on us as he wanted to. But at the same time, on that day, we became a death culture. We became a culture that worshiped death based on the false ideology of choice that these feminists have advanced over and over and over again, and that has cost us dearly because we were afraid to fight them. We were afraid to fight the media. We just would not declare God's truths. And as a result, our nation has suffered terribly, and our children are in a terrible place. Terrible place. If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? That's in Psalm 11:3. You see, if you don't have righteous laws like the Ten Commandments protecting your society, then you have nothing that will protect you and your people from evil to come upon them. Now I'm going to read to you an overview of something I published not too long ago. Hold on for a minute, please. There we go. And I'll start by identifying the article as America's Irreplaceable Importance Among the Nations. Because of God's unseen hand guiding the affairs of our nation, America has become the strongest, wealthiest, and most intellectually respected nation on the planet. And for those out here that don't have enough years to understand this history, I want you to listen to me and learn from what I am saying. You are privileged to live in America. You have had over 1 million men die in wars defending your rights to be protected by this Constitution. It's now your turn to step up to the plate and say, I will defend this Constitution and this nation against all unrighteous laws. It's now your turn to say, I'm not going to let this leftist thinking, which is Marxist and even communist, come in and confuse me into thinking what is and isn't important. The Lord's favor on America has been evident from her inception. America has over 330,000 churches. Think about that for a moment. 330,000. No other nation in history has had that many churches. We have about 400,000 preachers. No other nation in history has ever had that number of preachers. We have thousands of radio and TV gospel broadcasts. Thousands of Christian charities that give money and support away without condition. Why? Because the love of Christ enables them to do so, because they're constrained to do so under the love of Christ's gospel. We have thousands of missionaries who preach the gospel throughout the world. Through America's military might and international influence, nations such as England, Spain, Italy, France, Germany, Japan, Korea, Philippines, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and I am Polish, by the way, so I'm very, very empathetic to the work America did to help Poland. Hungary, and many other nations, they were delivered from tyrannical governments after World War II. Today, these nations are democratic societies, governing themselves peacefully because of us. America never conquered them. We liberated them so they could be the people they choose to be. There is no other nation on the planet with such a noble history. Folks, don't give it up. You are in an honored place as Americans. And if you don't listen to me for the importance of what it is that you need to do and we need to do to protect this nation and our Constitution, then I would just as soon you get off the radio. Don't listen to me anymore. I don't need to talk to people who have blocked up their ears with foolish liberal thinking. So why has America become a decadent nation? And we are a decadent nation, folks. The answer is quite simple. We are no longer a God-fearing people. You know, I had a Bible study I taught years ago, 40 years ago. In a jail up in Ohio. And I would have these prisoners come into my group, and we would conduct a Bible reading, the purpose for which is to share some of God's Word with them. And one after another would call me Reverend. And I thought to myself, I wonder why. I didn't ask him to do that. I didn't tell him I was a reverend. And I am a preacher, but not a pastor. But he, one after another, would call me reverend. And I said, why? And you know why? Because 40 years ago, we were a God-fearing people where even the unbelievers respected God. They may not have known exactly who Jesus Christ is and the role he plays in their salvation, but they knew that there was a God they had to answer to. And they respected people who represented him. The Lord warned Israel in Hosea 4:6. He says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children, as they were increased, so they sinned against me. Therefore, I will change their glory into shame. Now that's where we are today. America has fallen into this satanic trap based on secularism and anti-Christian ideologies. And instead of fighting against them and declaring the truths that we know, which is the only hope that America and the world has, we said, hey, it's okay, you can teach what you want, and it won't be harmful. And the church, the preachers, and the leaders, they just sat back, and they surrendered this culture to the enemy. And they allowed the enemy to put in their emissaries who govern us today, who control our schools, who control our governments. Because the church wouldn't step up and stop it. You see, we were not as Christians called to be pacifists. We were called to be proclaimers of the gospel, which includes righteousness, and that means there are times when you confront evil. The question we now have to ask is, will the Lord restore us once again to be a favored nation? That is my prayer, folks. That is the hope of my heart. I hope it is now the hope of yours. And I hope as this program continues over the next many months, that you will invite others to come to learn from what we are going to share, especially in the second hour when we're going to talk about the chapters in the book that you will find astounding. And it'll be an education that you will be able to leave with your children and grandchildren that no one else is going to give you. No one. There is no one in America that's going to share with you what I'm going to teach you now. So I hope that you will join with us and recognize that the work we are doing is so important that it has priority over everything. That you would be willing to make sacrifices on behalf of this work. That you would share your wealth with us in some fashion, either through buying books or help us to sponsor books to state legislators. We're trying to get 7,500 of these books to state legislators all over the country. We need sponsors. It's $19.95 a book. That includes postage, and we will get that book out to a legislator in your state. Remember, we have to confront evil with truth. We will not win if we think that all we need to do is let someone else take the burden. You know, I am so tired of these so-called great leaders we have, especially in the church, who have sat back and watched 50 million babies perish, which they have the first duty of all men to protect. And they left the issue alone for 42 years because they were afraid it would violate their tax-exempt status or it would violate their code of preaching, which was only the salvation is to be preached, not righteousness. See, it's a two-sided coin, the gospel. The first side is salvation, the second side is God's righteousness. Look at Matthew 28, 19 and 20. You'll see what I'm talking about. But the point is, I'm tired of hearing these people tell me that they're so righteous. I have many, many preacher friends, and many that agree with me, but there are too many who don't, because they do not understand that they have a dual responsibility, and the only way to defend our godly culture is for them to speak out and say, that's enough. This sin is not right. Homosexuality is not right. Traditional family is the only way. Sanctity of life is God's way. They didn't speak out. And they've caused us irreparable damage. Now, I'm going to also address, before we come to the close of this hour, one other matter. If I can get through this this presentation without coughing too much, and I thank you for your tolerance. I'm going to read to you the Declaration of Independence, because in it is the preamble to the Constitution. And I want you to understand what the founders were thinking when they fought in state delegations between themselves to establish the Constitution so as to honor these words in the Declaration of Independence. I want you to understand that. The secularists have separated the two. The secularists said, well, that's not part of the Constitution. It's as much as the Constitution itself, because it shows us the values that were part of the founders' thinking when they designed the Constitution. And those values are to be born into law under our present Constitution through the values that we have in this preamble. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary, and by the way, you know that the Declaration of Independence was written when? It was signed on July 4th, 1776. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the cause which impel them to the separation. Quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident. You see, they assumed God gave them to us. What I'm about to read to you, they knew didn't come from man. They didn't come from the monarch in England. They assumed and believed that they were God-given. That's why we call them inalienable rights. Now, what are they? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, black, white, yellow, male, female, it doesn't matter their color, their gender, anything else, all men are created equal. Why? Because we're made in the image of God. You see, there is no greater value that a man can have than to declare that he is made in the image of his Creator. You see, my value as a man doesn't come from what feminists think of me. I often tell feminists, look, my masculinity, my Christian character, has nothing to do with you. I am defined by God. He tells me who I am. And my wife, she is defined by God. And God has given us 50 years of marriage because we tried to honor each other in a relationship that was based on godly teachings. And also with the understanding that we were both equal before the Lord. We had the same value because the both of us are made in the image of God. Now you may not want to hear that. Again, turn your radio off. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me if I have one person out there listening anymore. These truths have to be stated. But the fact remains that if we don't have value that is given to us by God, then the value that we might have will be given to us by what men perceive us to be. So the Nazis said the Jews are an ugly people. They are worthless. They don't deserve to be alive. And they manipulated their government and their people to where they managed to destroy, murder in the furnaces of Auschwitz and elsewhere, 6 million Jews. That's what happens when you allow men to define who you are and your value. And the same is now true with the Muslims who hate the Jews. I tell you, we're going to talk about the Jews at another time as to why they're so important to God. It's not just because they're made in the image, but they also have an incredibly important role in completing God's redemptive plan throughout the ages. There's no other nation in history with that responsibility. Some of the Jews don't understand that. But I love the Jew because I know the importance they have to God. But at any rate, so now the Muslims look at the Jew and Satan instigates their hearts to hate them for no good reason. And they come up with all kinds of false ideas as to why they're an evil people. They're going to wish they'd never been born too. God will not tolerate them for too much longer. And Israel will stand. So we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights, that among these rights are life. Remember, we have already destroyed worldwide maybe 700 million to 1 billion unborn babies. That's how despicable it is to allow secularists to define human life. 700 million to 1 billion unborn babies have been murdered because of a false ideology of choice, which was a Marxist ideology coming out of the Stalinist Russia in the early part of the 1900s. We'll talk more about that. Also, that among these life and then liberty, you and I have a right to do what we want. Now, we can't do it to the harm of others, but we have a right to choose our mate. We have a right to raise our families. We have a right to work. We have a right to build businesses, to move, or whatever. That's our right. Government didn't give us that right. But these founders found ways to codify it and to protect us so we retain that right legally. And then also to pursue happiness as we define it. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. Now, folks, the wisdom of the founders was Article 5. It is immeasurably important that we understand what the founders did when they offered Article 5 to the legislatures for ratification. They literally provided a way so that our inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness will be preserved forever. But you have to be wise enough to know how to use it. You can't leave it to the nuts that keep telling us that God doesn't exist. You have to do it based on the fact that you know He exists, and you need to defend those rights by defending this Constitution, which in fact is in terrible shape right now. But the Countermand Amendment can rectify all of that. Now, I know we're running out of time in this first hour. Zita, do we have any time left before we close this hour out?
Well, it's straight up 9 o'clock. Do you want to go ahead and do your break?
Go ahead, ma'am, and we'll pick up on the other side of the break.
Alrighty then, and here is some Paul Harvey, y'all. You got 8 minutes, so go relax and get you some coffee. We'll be right back, folks.
Known and understood than the WHO. The United States of America was born in 1776, but it was conceived 169 years before that. The earliest settlers had watered the New World with much sweat. They had built substantial holdings for themselves, for their families. And when the time came to separate themselves from a tyranny an ocean away, at best it meant starting all over again after the ravages of war. Researching what you're about to hear gave a whole new dimension to my reverence for our nation's first citizens. All others of the world's revolutions, before and since, were initiated by men who had nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. Our founders had everything to lose and nothing to gain, except one thing. Hello, Americans. I'm Paul Harvey. You may not be able to quote one line from the Declaration of Independence at this moment. Henceforth, you'll always be able to quote at least one line. It's in the last paragraph where you will recall when I remind you. It says, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." In the Pennsylvania State House that's now called Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the best men from each of the colonies sat down together. This was a very fortunate hour in our nation's history, one of those rare occasions in the lives of men when we had greatness to spare. These were men of means, well-educated. 24 were lawyers and jurists. 9 were farmers, owners of large plantations. On June 11, a committee sat down to draw up a Declaration of Independence. We were going to tell the British fatherland no more rule by redcoats. Below the dam of ruthless foreign rule, the stream of freedom was running shallow and muddy. And we were going to light a fuse to dynamite that dam. This pact, as Burke later put it, was a partnership between the living and the dead and the yet unborn. There was no bigotry, there was no demagoguery in this group. All had shared hardships. Jefferson finished a draft of the document in 17 days. Congress adopted it in July, and so much is familiar history. But now, King George III had denounced all rebels in America as traitors. Punishment for treason was hanging. The names now so familiar to you from the several signatures on that Declaration of Independence, the names were kept secret for 6 months, for each knew the full meaning of that magnificent last paragraph in which his signature pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. 56 men placed their names beneath that pledge. 56 men knew when they signed that they were risking everything. They knew if they won this fight, the best they could expect would be years of hardship in a struggling nation. And if they lost, they'd face a hangman's rope. But they signed the pledge. And here is the documented fate of that gallant 56. Carter Braxton of Virginia, wealthy planter, trader, saw his ships swept from the seas. To pay his debts, he lost his home and all of his properties and died in rags. Thomas Lynch, Jr., who signed that pledge, was a third-generation rice grower, aristocrat, large plantation owner. After he signed, his health failed. His wife and he set out for France to regain his failing health. Their ship never got to France, was never heard from again. Thomas McKean of Delaware was so harassed by the enemy that he was forced to move his family 5 times in 5 months. He served in Congress without pay, his family in poverty and in hiding. Vandals looted the properties of Ellery and Clymer and Hall and Gwinnett and Walton and Hayward and Rutledge and Middleton. Thomas Nelson, Jr. of Virginia raised $2 million on his own signature to provision our allies, the French fleet. After the war, he personally paid back the loans, wiped out his entire estate, and he was never reimbursed by his government. In the final battle for Yorktown, he, Nelson, urged General Washington to fire on his, Nelson's, own home, which was occupied by Cornwallis. It was destroyed. Thomas Nelson, Jr. had pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. The Hessians seized the home of Francis Hopkinson of New Jersey. Francis Lewis had his home and everything destroyed, his wife imprisoned. She died within a few months. Richard Stockton, who signed that declaration, was captured, mistreated, his health broken to the extent that he died at 51. His estate was pillaged. Thomas Hayward, Jr. was captured when Charleston fell. John Hart was driven from his wife's bedside while she was dying. Their 13 children fled in all directions for their lives. His fields and grist mill were laid waste. For more than a year, he lived in forests and caves and returned home after the war to find his wife dead, his children gone, his properties gone, and he died a few weeks later of exhaustion and a broken heart. Lewis Morris saw his land destroyed, his family scattered. Philip Livingston died within a few months from the hardships of the war. John Hancock, history remembers best due to a quirk of fate rather than anything he stood for. That great sweeping signature attesting to his vanity towers over the others. One of the wealthiest men in New England. And yet he stood outside Boston one terrible night of the war, and he said, "Burn Boston, though it makes John Hancock a beggar, if the public good requires it." So he, too, lived up to the pledge. Of the 56, few were long to survive. 5 were captured by the British and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes from Rhode Island to Charleston sacked, looted, occupied by the enemy, or burned. 2 lost their sons in the army. 1 had 2 sons captured. 9 of the 56 died in the war from its hardships or from its more merciful bullets. I don't know what impression you had of the men who met that summer in Philadelphia. But I think it's important that we remember this about them. They were not poor men. They were not wild-eyed pirates. These were men of means. They were rich men, most of them, and had enjoyed much ease and luxury in their personal living. Not hungry men, Certainly not terrorists, not irresponsible malcontents, not fanatical incendiaries. These men were prosperous men, wealthy landowners. They were substantially secure in their prosperity. They had everything to lose. But they considered liberty, and this is as much as I shall say of it. They had learned that liberty is so much more important than security, that they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And they fulfilled their pledge. They paid the price. And freedom was born.
Well, welcome back to the second hour of Citizens Initiative with Charles Kaprowicz. And here's Charles.
Thank you, Zita. Boy, do I... Thank you, Zita. I tell you, folks, I think maybe I just made a mistake here. I've got something going on at the same time. I know what it is. I've got the chat on the... there we go. I just wish that we had Paul Harvey in the world yet today. What a marvelous patriot he has always been. And I surely enjoyed listening to his teaching. And that was an exquisite, an excellent presentation of patriotic ideas that only Paul Harvey can actually recite. Now, folks, there's an event coming up before we get into our lesson on the Countermand Amendment, the missing piece in the Article 5 puzzle, which the lesson title is Article 5 101. And you're going to learn now what Article 5 is all about and why we have it and how we can reclaim our republic with it. But before I do that, I want to give a little bit of a promotion here to the Red, White, and Blue Fest, which is going to take place in Florida, at Sunny Hills, Florida. And here's a little printout that I took from a promotion that was sent to me by the director, Stephen Gronka, for the Red, White, and Blue Fest. And by the way, I am also a featured speaker for 3 days down there in Florida on the constitutional seminars. So here's the information that I received. Red, White, and Blue Fest National Patriot Rally and the action event, 9/11 Patriot Ride 2015, where Gold Star moms and dads are going to serve citizen warrants on Obama, Biden, senators, congressmen, bureaucrats, et al., who have violated their oath of office and or committed other crimes against the people. Please feel free to share the information below, and that's at their website, Red, White, and Blue Fest on and Facebook, and also constitutionalpatriots.org. Please feel free to share the information below with any and all groups and individuals that you want, along with teaching how to do citizen warrants and citizen grand juries. Can you imagine such a thing? And other legal remedies for removing politicians and bureaucrats. We have a biker rodeo, so it's not all business. There's going to be a lot of fun. A biker rodeo, trucker rodeo. We're going to have veterans and law enforcement marksman championship contests. We're going to have civilian marksman championship contests. We're going to have product demonstrations for archery and other products. Andy Ross, the country singer, and Bo Hunter with shows on the Sportsman Channel, wants to sing to give demonstrations at Red, White, and Blue Fest. His big patriot song right now is Cold Dead Hands. You've all heard that, folks. I love that song. There will be a tent city and camping village that will include RVs, coaches, tractors, and trailers, and recreation for the whole family, including fishing, swimming, golf, tennis, bike trails, and sports fields. This is a big event, folks. On May 1st to May 3rd, 3-day event. There will be 3 nights of country music and folk rock concerts featuring 3 acts per night. Wow, I can't wait till I get there. This is going to be a great family event, and the teaching will include kids as well as with We the Kids history clubs. Now I'm going to put a plug in here. We the Kids, headed up by a dear friend of mine, Judy, actually is doing an incredible job with young people in teaching them the values of our Constitution. This event's going to be at Sunny Hills, Florida, north of Panama City. It will be on May 1st to the 3rd, 2015. Paste this announcement on Twitter and Facebook and elsewhere, but you'll have to go to my website to get it. That's Charles Kaprowicz. It's on my timeline. At any rate, folks, this is a big event, and you would be more than pleased as a result of participating in it. You come along. Zeta Andrews, our producer, has had an incredibly important role in moving this event forward, and actually I think that she initiated it. But the fact is that in order to carry some of the load, Steve Gronka has picked up the pieces and accomplished the impossible. So come to the event. This is a big, big event, and we're going to be there with the Countermand Amendment and the Countermand Amendment book. I will be signing copies of my new book, Countermand Amendment, The Missing Piece in the Article 5 Puzzle, for those who want a copy. And also I will be teaching seminars on the reasons why the Constitution was never intended to be a lost document, and why the Countermand Amendment can actually give us the authority, power to reclaim and to restore our Constitution and our constitutional republic. Okay, now here we are in the second hour. And we are about to begin what I promised you in the first hour. Has never been done before on the radio that I know of. And that is, we're going to go through chapter by chapter lessons on Article 5, 101, and the Countermand Amendment, the missing piece in the Article 5 puzzle. Now, for those of you who do not have a book, and I would highly recommend that you get one, folks, I don't make much money. If I do make money, we pay our expenses to some degree. 98% of all our expenses are paid for by us, and almost for the last 40 years. So I'm not in this to make money. I'm in this to restore this republic. And if you don't want the book, and don't buy it. Doesn't matter to me. But if you want the book, I think it will become a classic in your library, and it will help you and your kids and your grandchildren to have a document that they will be able to look at over the years and even follow in these lessons that we're going to begin in a preliminary way tonight. Now, I would say go to countermands.us, click on the cover or the donate button by the cover on that page, and order a book. It'll cost you $19.95, which will include printing, shipping and packaging, and we will ship it to you immediately. You will get the book very, very quickly. Certainly by next Tuesday for the second lesson. Actually, it'll probably be a continuation of the first lesson. But the point is, this is a book that will help you to understand what you have in the Constitution. That's countermands.us. You can order a copy to follow us in this Article 5 101 course, and you will also be able to participate online in the PNN Talk Radio chat, which I am right now monitoring. So, feel free to do so, and we will get that book out to you right away. Now, with that, we want to start. Hold on, please. We want to start by also telling you, and I forgot to mention this, that the book is also available and can be ordered through bookstores, local bookstores. You can also find them in public libraries, and also you can order it on Amazon. So you can get it in a number of different ways. I believe it's going to turn out to be a classic and a bestseller. I don't really care if it's ever a bestseller. My purpose is not to make it the most powerful, profit-making book in the nation. My purpose is to help you understand what we have in Article 5. And I believe that we have been doing that. Okay, I have some preliminary thoughts that I want to cover that come from the book. Here's the first, if I can just hold my coughing down. 13 state legislatures in 1787, through delegates they sent to the Constitutional Convention, created the new Constitution. Eventually, all 13 legislatures ratified the new Constitution. With ratification, they also created 3 branches of the federal government. Please hear what I'm about to say. The federal government did not create state legislatures. The federal government did not create state legislatures. The federal government is subject to the collective will of today's state legislatures under Article 5 because we are a constitutional republic where every state has an equal vote to decide the direction of our nation. That's what a republic is. And then each state can retain its personal identity because it's not forced to conform to federal mandates. I visited Louisiana last year. Actually, it was in December. I spoke. I spoke at the Balanced Budget Amendment Committee, a bipartisan committee of both the House and Senate, and I was impressed with the culture that Louisiana has in their state legislature. I was impressed because it's different than the culture I come from. There was something very unique about it. I don't want to lose it. Those people have something special. Here in North Carolina, we have some special values that are important to the people of North Carolina. Though I am not a native, I've been here for 22 years, but the fact is, I don't want them to lose it. I don't want Texas to lose their individuality, or Utah. Even California, if they want to go and become the Republic of Mexico, that's their business, but that's their character. I don't want them to be defined by what the federal government says they have to be. At the same time, I want us to realize that the founders wisely left for future generations of legislatures sovereignty and deliberative authority that empowers them to modify the conduct of the federal government through amendment conventions when the people suffer an egregious wrong that the federal government refuses to remedy. State legislatures do not need the consent of any branch of the federal government to require Congress to convene an amendment convention for the purpose of proposing amendments to the United States Constitution. Now we're going to get into some meaty stuff here, some heavy stuff. Again, I would suggest that you get the copy of this book, Countermand Amendment, The Missing Piece in the Article 5 Puzzle. Go to countermands.us and you will be able to order a copy today. But this book is going to be a classic. No one has ever written a book on the facts that are presented here, nor the idea that sovereignty rules, not politics, that sovereignty rules in state legislatures, not legal decisions by the Supreme Court or Congress or anyone else, not delegates sent to a convention, that sovereignty alone in state legislatures will determine the future course of America. They've always had the authority to do so. They just haven't figured out how to do it. I'm giving them now the opportunity to know how to do it. I just got off the phone with a state legislator just a little while ago. I was late for this show because of it. And I had a long conversation with her. She called me about 20 minutes before the hour. And and she had some issues that she wanted me to address. But I do believe that when we finish talking with her, She understood things a lot differently than she did before. Is excited about what we're doing, just wants us to make sure that we can get to ratification successfully. She wants to do everything she can to make that happen. Now, folks, there are many legislators like her. They know something is wrong. This book tells them how to do it. And it'll tell you how to do it. So don't allow yourself to be deceived into thinking, well, I don't know if I can afford $20. If you can't afford $20, then just listen. But at the same time, if you can, don't cheat yourself out of a classic book that's going to be something very valuable in your library for decades to come. I've been asked by one producer of a radio station, actually a CEO, he said, Charles, what you need to do is to take this book and put it into a leatherback, because this is the most important book that we have today in America. I believe that. Not because I wrote it, but because it contains what the founders left us, with a proper understanding of how we can restore this constitutional republic. Now here's some further ideas. Hold on. James Madison, who lived from March 16, 1751 to June 28, 1836, was an American statesman, political theorist, and the fourth president of the United States. He is hailed as the father of our Constitution for being instrumental in the drafting of the United States Constitution and as the key champion and author of the United States Bill of Rights. James Madison in Federalist Paper number 45 said, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Now he's saying what the federal government has in the Constitution. They are few powers and they are defined powers. That's what he is telling us. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. That's why we have Amendment 10. Remember, Amendment 10 is for unenumerated rights. Rights that the states can declare, but they don't know how to get them. They don't know how to retain them. They don't know how to codify them. The Countermand Amendment will show them how to do that. The nullification projects, which we will talk about in more detail in weeks to come, the fact is all they are is a temporary attempt to defy the federal government. The federal government can back in and use force to deny them their nullification. But with the Countermand Amendment, the Countermand stands as the nullification, and then when 30 states complete the same countermand on a law or ruling or regulation of some kind, then that law or ruling is rescinded. The states can't the federal government can no longer enforce that law. Yes, they can create a new law, but then they would have to do it with the understanding that the states would have the opportunity of rescinding that one too. So they're going to write laws and rulings more amenable to the states with the Countermand Amendment and make the states partners in government rather than addendums to their mandates. So those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The former, that is the federal powers, will be exercised principally on external objects as war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. The powers reserved to the states will extend to all the objects which, in the ordinary course of affairs, concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state. Now, isn't that interesting? We have just the opposite today. We have allowed the federal government, with these secularist and foolish lawmakers, to convince the state legislatures that the federal government's in charge. But the federal government under our Constitution has never been in charge. They really are servants for the purpose of protecting the states. And if they need more protection, they'll write a new amendment, the states. But they certainly should never allow the federal government to dictate to them on the basis that they're not treated respectfully and subjects to federal mandates. This must not be allowed. And yet at the same time, that is what has happened to us. We have to teach these legislators what they have in Article 5 and how they alone are the final arbiters in all constitutional matters. Now, we are going to be covering many, many subjects. A preamble to what I am about to read in chapters is the following. State legislatures must think in terms of sovereignty and deliberative status, not legal precedents, not experience, nor historical events. You know, there are some Article 5 groups out there that think that the convention will be controlled properly by delegates because of legal precedents by the Supreme Court. That's foolish. Actually, it's the legislatures that require the Supreme Court to conform to the will of amendments that the legislatures ratify. And so it's not the Supreme Court that tells the states what an amendment should be. It's the states that tell the Supreme Court what an amendment should be and how they should rule accordingly. That's the reason for this reversal here, is because the federal government has forced the states into thinking of a line. And many of these pro-Article 5 groups are doing the same thing, and we'll address them in more direct fashion in the weeks ahead. At any rate, state legislatures must think in terms of sovereignty and deliberative status. When I was in this Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force down in Louisiana, I had and I had an hour presentation. They treated me extremely well. I had two legislators who were supporters of the Convention of States application. They said to me, surely you want to find a way to work with the Convention of States. And I said, certainly I do. And so the implication was a wide eye. And my answer to this one legislature who was co-chairman, I said, I can and I will and I want to, but there are two principles I must not violate. I must not surrender sovereign authority under Article 5 that the states alone have to anybody. Not to Congress, not to the courts, not to the executive, not to delegates. And second, I must insist that the state legislatures alone retain deliberative authority to pre-approve the text of amendments that they send to a convention with their delegates. I must insist on that because you were elected to be the deliberative bodies in your state. You are required to deliberate on any kind of an issue that you have to deal with, legal issue, constitutional issue, in your state. And that includes Article 5. You don't need delegates to tell you how to do that. You alone have the authority and should retain the authority to do just that. Well, this legislator kind of looked up in the air and he realized that that was an issue that wasn't going to be settled quickly with COS, because they don't believe that. They think delegates are going to determine a lot of things at the convention without direction from the legislatures. But at any rate, so sovereignty and deliberative status is what the legislatures need to be dwelling on. Not legal precedent. It doesn't matter what the Supreme Court said. When the federal government, an amendment is ratified by the states, all branches of the government have to follow it. Second, it's not by convention experience. There is a great conservative scholar in our day who has studied the history of our nation and has wonderful ideas. He said something here that I disagree with. And he has said that the delegates at a convention will actually be governed by the history of 30 or more conventions that have already taken place before the Constitutional Convention started. Well, I think that that's very short-sighted. Because can you imagine up to 534, 35 politically charged delegates going to an amendment convention trying to decide what a balanced budget amendment is? My goodness, you've got 55 from California, you've got 5 from Wyoming. Who's going to win that battle? They haven't even decided that it's one vote per state. We're going to be talking about that in great detail in the weeks ahead. And then also, state legislatures must think in terms of sovereignty and deliberative status, not historical events. What happened in the past doesn't govern because sovereignty rules. So legal precedent doesn't control, convention experience doesn't control, history doesn't control. sovereignty in state legislatures under Article 5 does for the purpose of proposing amendments. Get a copy of this book, folks. You're going to like it. Now, here are the chapters, folks. State Chapter 1, we're going to be talking about state legislature sovereignty in more detail. Chapter 2, hold on. We're going to be having a counter amendment overview. Chapter 3, citizen initiatives. We'll be talking about our organization and its team. We have some of the best patriots this nation has ever seen on our team. I could give you names of Sandy Toth. I just admire this woman greatly. I mean, this poor woman has been working with me for probably over 5 years now. And folks, she sits in a wheelchair. She cannot get around on her legs. She's in pain almost constantly because of a ligament and spinal issues that she has, along with diabetes 1. And she has problems that you can't imagine. And when I talk to her, she's in pain while she's talking to me. And you know, she talks to me clearly, with clarity, and for the purpose of helping me understand these issues properly. And I deeply respect her for that. We have Mike Coombs, who up in Alaska is doing an exceptional job. He is our national director, and he actually is helping to advance the work in many states, not just Alaska. And I can't speak enough for him, and he's become a dear friend in a very, very short period of time over the last year and a half. We have another woman who I deeply respect, and that is Kelly Gordon out of Texas. And here's a woman that's been through a lot, but she knows that America hangs in the balance, and she makes tremendous sacrifices in order to move us forward and to help this amendment succeed. And she is a big, big asset to me personally. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that and how you can be part of the Citizen Initiative team by going to countermans.us and signing up. We're going to be talking about how to propose amendments. We're going to be talking about state legislatures as the final arbiters in all constitutional matters. That's a phrase that's never been used before. We're also, Chapter 6, what federal laws can the states countermand and rescind? How is it that we can apply these countermands? How about Chapter 7, Article 5, and the countermand amendment that empowers states' legislatures? If I get through this, folks, without coughing too much, it'll be a miracle, so you pray for me. Chapter 8, Article 5 does not allow delegates to write a new constitution. We're going to tell you why. We're going to explain that in great detail. Article 5 and Chapter 9 and the Constitutional Convention, are they different? Are they the same? Chapter 10, the actual transition from the Articles of Confederation to the U.S. Constitution. And contrary to what some have claimed, that there was a usurpation of power, the people in the anti-Article 5 groups make that claim. They're totally wrong. And by the way, they sound smart. They've got some of the supposedly the greatest constitutional scholars in the country arguing their points. But they don't have wisdom when it comes to Article 5. They lack wisdom, and they lack understanding as to why we have it and how the founders left it for us to use safely. Number 12, or 11, delegates at the Constitutional Convention versus an Article 5 Amendment Convention. Are they the same? We're going to tell you about that. How about state legislatures? Did they create the federal government, or didn't they? We're going to explain why. 13, many pro-Article 5 groups will cause abdication of state sovereignty. Chapter 14, state legislatures are the deliberative body. Chapter 15, the thorniest problem at the 1787 Constitutional Convention. We're going to tell you what that problem was. And it'll be a problem that will have to be solved at every Article 5 Amendment Convention. That's going to be a very important lesson. Number 16, why one vote per state is so important. Most important issue, this was the most important issue at the Constitutional Convention. Number 17, 534 politically charged delegates at an Article 5 Amendment Convention. What happens? We're going to explain to you what will happen and what can happen if we do it foolishly. Chapter 18, the countermeasures Amendment will avoid a lengthy and disruptive convention. Chapter 19, the Countermand Amendment is nonpartisan. Now, folks, I have already had Democrats who have turned us down because of national politics. Shame on them. This is a nonpartisan issue based on the retention of states' rights. Folks, if you are electing these foolish politicians to throw your authority under Article 5 away based on national politics, get them out of office. Get rid of them. They're doing nothing but destroying your heritage and your children's future. Get rid of them. They either are going to stand up and be counted and realize their first duty is to protect your rights, your state's rights, and not their national party. If they don't, get rid of them. Chapter 20, states, and then we're going to talk a lot about that. Chapter 20, states become respected partners with the federal government. How that can happen. 21, we're going to talk about tools with teeth. You're going to like that chapter, because we're going to show you how the Countermand Amendment will be enforced by the states, not the federal government. Chapter 22, state nullification versus unenumerated rights. We're going to define that, explain it in detail. Chapter 23, Article 5 Countermand Amendment process. What's the overall process? 24, delegate resolution does not violate Article 1, Section 10. Now, folks, one of the biggest issues that the other pro-Article 5 groups are missing is Article 1, Section 10. And it has to do with having a compact between the states that is prohibited without Congress's approval. We're going to tell you why Congress must not get involved with this, and no compacts should be started by the states for the purpose of amending the Constitution under Article 5. Congress is out of the picture. They are a facilitator to do the will of the states and to provide a reasonable, manageable process through to ratification. I know this is contrary to what you've been hearing from many of these constitutional so-called scholars, but they're wrong. And the only way we're going to restore this Constitution is if state legislatures retain their sovereign authority. No other way, unless we go to bullets. I'm not advocating explosions. I'm advocating a peaceful transition that we have opportunity to do in Article 5. So that's going to be a big chapter, chapter 24. Chapter 25, we're going to explain to you our 34, 26, 38, 51 strategy and why we can win. You say, what's that all about? When we get to chapter 25, you'll find out. Chapter 26, we're going to talk about a comparison table that shows the Countermand Amendment versus all other proposed amendments and why every one of them are impotent compared to us. '27, we will be presenting the official documents for nonpartisan Countermand Amendment. Chapter 28, we're going to be talking about the National Strategy Committee, composed of legislators and citizens. You might even want to be part of that. But the fact is, this is a very important chapter. Chapter 29, text for the Countermand Amendment. We'll be talking about that in depth. Chapter 30, the Countermand Amendment application on Congress. What is it about? What is required? And 31, Countermand Amendment Delegate Resolution. After that, we have a printed copy of the Constitution itself and the Bill of Rights. We will be giving some overview in remembrance of what we had talked about in the early chapters. Now, having said all of this, I think, Sandy, did you have something you'd like to add at this point?
I thought you'd never ask, Charles. I think you've been doing a really good job, by the way. I'm proud of you.
Thank you, Sandy.
I think people really need to get into their heads that they have heard so many things wrong, especially from certain groups like the John Birchers, that you can't do an Article 5 convention. And when I was learning more about this process, years ago, I found out that in 1980, we had 32 calls for a balanced budget amendment. 32. We needed 34, 2 more calls to call for an amendment convention for a balanced budget amendment. And here came the John Birchers and Eagle Forum and scared many of the state legislators so that they wound up, many of them rescinding. We didn't get the other 2 calls, and about 16 states rescinded their calls so that they could not be used. Now just think about that, just in itself. What would our country be like if today and all these years we would have had a balanced budget amendment? Just think about that, because that's one of the major problems that's been destroying this country, is spending all this money, putting us in so much debt. And they don't care in Washington what they're doing to everyone. And if you just think about the fact that we could have had a balanced budget amendment and perhaps never have had all this horrible debt. And all you can do is blame these poor misguided people that went in and scared everyone. Now, it is possible that Congress wouldn't have followed it, but that's why with the countermand, we have certain clauses to address that. So states have the right to enforce the amendment. And I think that's what really is the key, because that's part of the problem now. The states look at what's going on, and Congress is ignoring what the Constitution says. The president is ignoring. He doesn't care. All he wants to do is bend everything to his will. We need to get this country back on track. If we don't, we're going to be lost. And I hope you will consider coming back each week to learn about what we're doing, to learn about the countermand and the tremendous power that it can give back to the states and to the people. Because with the countermand too, states can enforce the individual rights of the people. For example, with the Second Amendment and gun laws. If you haven't heard about Operation Choke Point, check it out on the internet, because it's the latest thing the Obama administration is doing, trying to shut down places of business that sell guns. Things like this could be stopped. We wouldn't have to worry about the Second Amendment, or if the United Nations is going to be controlling our guns. With the countermand, the states can stop things cold. And make sure that the federal government never gets out of control like it's been. Because it isn't just taking care of the things that are the problems now. Like when you think about it, countermand Obamacare, EPA regulations, federal land grabs. We can go on and on, but it also applies to the future, so that your children will not have to live in a country where the federal government is on their backs all the time, because they can get their state legislators to get moving and countermand anything the federal government does to step out of line. So it's not only for now and the near future, but it's also for the distant future. because this amendment will provide long-lasting protection.
Thank you, Sandy. That's very excellent material, and it does complement what I've been trying to say. And you're right, it is that important. And I trust that the audience realizes that. Mike, did you have something you wanted to add to this tonight? Okay, Mike had a committee call in Alaska, and he might be on that committee call right now. Now, I do want to add, before I go further into the chapters and the introduction of the book, I want you to consider for a minute something that Sandy has alluded to, the Balanced Budget Amendment. Over 40 years in the making, by at least 2 generations of patriots who have tried to rein in federal spending with the Balanced Budget Amendment. You see, the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force is really like the second or third generation of groups that have been trying to get an amendment for balancing the budget through. The amendment process started well over 30 years ago. It may go back to the early 60s. But the fact is that the amendment proposals on Congress through Article 5 did succeed, I should say, in securing 33 applications from the states for the Balanced Budget Amendment Convention. Now, unfortunately, as Sandy alluded to, when the John Birches and the Eagle Forum and the Libertarians, some of them, and the Liberals and others came against the state legislatures, they scared them half to death, paralyzed them, and I believe it was 18 states that rescinded their applications on Congress, leaving only 14. And from there, the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force took over. And they have managed to get these applications renewed. So today, there are 27 active amendments for the Balanced Budget Amendment on the books under Article 5 in Congress, and they only need 7 more. And that means they've made tremendous progress. But it isn't the Balanced Budget Amendment versus the Countermand Amendment. The Countermand Amendment is a totally different reason for amending the Constitution. Under Article 5, because you can propose amendments, you can have multiple amendments going forward at the same time. And we will support the Balanced Budget Amendment. We already, I told you before, have endorsed the No Runaway Convention Act, and they have endorsed our pre-approved text as well as the delegate resolution, even though some of their leadership today seems to be wavering a little bit. The fact is, I don't believe we have a problem. But they're right, they need to go forward with the Balanced Budget Amendment. At the same time, they have picked up the pieces and made something beautiful out of what otherwise would have been a disaster. Why is it significant that we're only 7 states short? Because if these well-meaning anti-Article 5 groups and individuals had joined in the fight for the BBA, as Sandy said, we would not have today an $18 trillion debt. We wouldn't have 125, maybe $150 trillion of unfunded liabilities that our children have to bear, which I believe today amounts to about $500,000 apiece. This, as I said earlier, is an unforgivable consequence of their poor judgment. So, they mean well, the anti-Article 5 groups, they want to do well, but they are misguided and they have cost us dearly. They need to be stopped. Now, saying all that, we only have a few minutes left. I just want to read a few passages in the introduction. Folks, please go to the website countermands.us, order your copy. Actually, the website that you can go to for getting the book ordered directly is Countermands. Well, I'll say just go to countermands.us. It's simpler. There's a cover on the front page and the entry page, and you can order it from there. Just hit the donate button and donate $19.95, and we'll send you the book right away. The purpose of this book is to show state legislators and concerned citizens how Article 5 of the United States Constitution can and should be used to restore our constitutional republic safely, quickly, and peacefully. Did you know that the convention, the amendment convention, could be as little as 7 days? I'm going to show you how that can be done and why it can be done safely. Laws and agency regulations that are burdensome to the states, their citizens, and businesses can be countermanded, which is a form of nullification, without teeth, and then rescinded when 60% of the states countermand that law or regulation. That means the federal government can no longer enforce that law. Okay, I'm back. Encroachment by the federal government on states' rights and civil liberties has reached alarming proportions. The federal government regularly practices federal overreach through executive orders, executive memoranda, which is a new process that the president has created, congressional statutes, court decisions, agency regulatory rulings, even rulings by non-government agencies such as the Federal Reserve. Laws and rulings that encroach on states' rights can be safely remedied by the states with the Countermand Amendment. Now, as we get into we only have a few minutes left, but as we get into the lessons, which we will be starting with Chapter 1 next week, that lesson is going to be sovereignty and the Articles of Confederation, how it plays into the Constitutional Convention. As we get into that, please order your book, countermands.us, order the book online, get one for your children, get one for your grandchildren, get one for friends. Let them know that this is an historical event that they can participate in. We are making constitutional history right now. And by the time we get done, once this amendment is ratified, we will prove that this was the most important constitutional event since the Constitution itself in 1787. That's how important this is. Because if the states don't step up and make their voices heard with the authority they presently have under Article 5, we will fall as a nation. I can promise you that, based on our requirements of our constitutional republic being abused and lost, and a tyrannical form of control over our lives coming from the federal government, which we already have. The fact is, there are an enormous number of laws that are already on the books. I think in the 50 states, between local, county, state, and federal laws, I estimate that there's about 5 million laws that have been imposed on us. Many of them are duplicative, I understand that. Thou shalt not kill, for example, is in all 50 states. It's in all counties and whatever. But the fact is, there
What's
are
up, my
5
friends?
million or more.
J7409 here with you. I
when
want
you
to
add
thank
the
my
regulatory
subscriber
rulings
turning
in
me
there.
on to this
And all of them,
information.
the citizens have to
China
obey
buys
if they don't
Walmart, will
want to
rebrand
suffer
as
the punishment
Great
that
Walmart.
is given out
Man, I have
by
found
the
this
court
now. I don't
for
know if this is
disobedience.
true or not, but I'm
You
going
see,
to
the
read this
Countermand
to you
Amendment
folks
can
in a
stop
move
that
that
at a
took
federal
both
level.
Wall Street
Well, we can
and
finally say
Main
to the
Street
federal
USA
government,
by
put things in
surprise.
place
The
that do
world's
not reflect
largest
your
nation has
left-leaning
announced the
ideology.
acquisition of the
Put a law
world's
in place
largest
that we can
retailer.
respect that's for our
The
good, because your
Beijing-based
purpose
People's
is to
Republic
protect
of
us.
China will
It's
acquire
not for you to
the
dominate us.
Bentonville,
And
Arkansas-based
put a law in
Walmart and
place that
straight
will
up
actually help
swap
us to grow our
of
economy,
U.S. federal
not to
debt
control the
for the
environmentalists, which is
retailer's
an ideology.
outstanding stock.
You know, I'm
The
a
transaction
conservationist.
is expected to close
And a
immediately
conservationist says we
and will
are
result in
mandated
the
by God
renaming
to
of
protect
all
our environment, protect the
8,500
habitat,
Walmart
and to protect our
stores
wildlife. We're
as
mandated
Great
to do that.
Walmart.
And we have to do everything
the
possible to do
rebranding
that.
of
But we are
retailers
not mandated
Sam's
to be
Club
environmentalists for the
outlets
purpose
as
of advancing
Nano's
a
Club.
tree-hugging
It's been a long time for China
ideology
to take its
that is
rightful place
worshiping
on the
nature
world stage of mass
rather than
market
God
retailing.
himself. And so
Said
it's that I
the
reject.
Chinese Prime Minister,
And
who
good
will
thinking
take on the
people, I
additional
believe, feel the
title of
same way.
CEO
So,
/ party chief of
we
the
are in the
combined
throes of,
operations. We intend follow
advancing a
in
work
the
that's
spiritual
historical.
footsteps
You
of
can
our
have
visionary
part in
forefathers.
it, and I would
Sam
encourage you
Walton.
to order this book,
That's what he
countermands.us. If you
And
have to, go to
live in a
Amazon.com
broadcast
or
from
go
the
to a
company's
bookstore
new
and order it through the
headquarters
bookstore
from
if you don't have
Shaheen.
access online, because you can do so there as well. And we will have this book sent to you ASAP, and you then will be able to follow these lessons over the next 8 weeks. Actually, it may be a little more than 8 weeks, depending on how much we can cover each night. There will be a chat. You can actually participate in the chat room on PNN Talk Radio. We will respond to your comments while we are going forward in the material, and we will try to answer those comments. There will also be an after chat. You will have from us ways in which you can communicate with us. For example, on Facebook, you can go to Facebook.com/legislators, and you will see a website that we have, and we can chat back and forth on that website. Or you can go to Charles Kaprowicz, that's Charles.Kacprowicz, and you will be able to follow us on there and ask questions and make comments, and we will respond. Now, there will be a question and answer sheet that you'll also be able to look at, but the fact is, we want to help you, and we don't want to give you a grade. We want you to understand things in a way that's comfortable for you, and at the same time is going to make a difference for our nation. And we're going to give these vehicles to you so you can have interplay with us. So it's not just a one-way communication. So the PNN Talk Radio is the station. Let your friends and relatives know that it's on every Tuesday night from 8 p.m. Eastern until 10 p.m., that there is going to be ample opportunity to discuss issues of the day, and then an hour for discussing how we can remedy this with the countermand amendment. And the textbook being the countermand amendment, the missing piece in the Article 5 puzzle. Now, I do believe that we are coming to the end of our program. Am I not right, Zita?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do you want to do a prayer, or I usually end it in a Hebrew prayer, the Lord's Prayer?
Okay, I will be. I usually pray, but if you want to pray,
no,
I
you
will
go
be
ahead.
glad.
I do that from now on, but it's up to you. Whatever you go ahead. This is your show,
Okay.
Not mine. I do
All
my
right,
shows.
I'll close with a short prayer,
There
folks.
you
It is
go.
my custom
Yeah.
to have a short prayer at the end of this program, and I'm going to be offering that right now. So bear with me, and I'll ask God's blessing on you and on this work. Father, we are engaged in a battle for the minds and souls, and I believe the lives of men, not just in America, but around the world. As Reagan once said, we are a lighthouse to the nations, and if this light is lost, the nations of the world will be a great loser. Lord, we need your help. We need your strength. We need your enabling. We need wisdom. We need resources. We need participants. We need supporters. We need workers. We need volunteers. But Lord, you have all of those already provided, because you know how important this work for you to complete your purposes in this nation under this Constitution. And I believe, dear God, with my whole heart, that you haven't finished your work in America yet. I also believe that Israel does hang in the balance, but for the direction of this nation. And I believe for that reason alone, you want to preserve this country. Help us, Lord. We're going to fail unless you give us guidance and give us direction. And we ask you, in the name of Jesus, your Son, to bless us, to prosper us, to protect our people, to protect their families, to protect their relatives and all those who support them. And Lord, give them the resources that they need to support us. And we'll give you praise, and we pray this and thank you for this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.